Burnice is the new powerhouse, taking over the top rank in tier lists for Zenless Zone 0 with her gorgeous looks and incredible damage. And in this video I'm going to show you how you can take her to the next level with some new tech and little tricks to allow Burnice and the rest of her team to not only be much more effective but also deal more damage. Because there is some wasted potential that I've seen many players missing out on, including big streamers, because they don't really understand some of Burnice's intricacies and all the small hidden interactions despite her having a rather simple kit. On top of all of that, I'm also going to be showcasing a few optimizations on your rotations, as well as Burnice's build and teams, and talking about how worth it would it be for you to go for her mind skip or her W engine, and which would be the most valuable to you. With that being said, hello everyone, my name is DarkHero, and let's get started by talking about a very specific tech. One such key mechanic that you should definitely master with Burnice to be as effective as possible and deal as much damage as possible is regarding the EX special attack, aka the flamethrower, and how you use it in tandem with your core passive. Because not only do you have multiple ways of using this ability, but the damage output and the anomaly buildup is also going to be different depending on how you use it. So let's start from the beginning. If you simply tap the EX special attack button, you will perform the basic version of your EX special attack with a single flamethrower. Doing so will consume 25% of Burnice's max energy, with the trade-off being that you deal around 50% of the enemy's anomaly buildup. However, while Burnice is using the EX special attack with the single flamethrower, if you press the same button again, she will take out a second flamethrower, this time consuming 50% of Burnice's energy and dealing around 80% anomaly buildup. So the single flamethrower is much more energy cost effective. However, in my opinion, because anomaly characters are very much dependent on how fast they are able to trigger their anomaly effects, I do believe that using the double flamethrower is going to be much more effective for most of the time. Although it should be noted that whenever you're using a single flamethrower, you're able to dodge out of any incoming attacks by simply dodging to the side by tapping the direction button. That being said, you can actually increase the anomaly buildup of the double flamethrower by using a couple of actions before you use it. For example, if you hold the basic attack button and perform Burnice's heavy charged attack, you can then press the EX special attack and go directly into the double flamethrower. And not only does this act as a shortcut for you to be able to go into the double flamethrower quicker, but it will also boost the anomaly buildup from 80% to 100%, meaning that you are effectively guaranteeing that you're going to trigger the burn effect. And the same thing actually goes for whenever you perform a parry with Burnice, and immediately after swapping into Burnice, you perform the EX special attack, you will again go into the double flamethrower, and the double anomaly buildup will also be 100%. And this is extremely effective and something that you should definitely be taking into account, because let's say for example you are playing with Jane Doe and you trigger assault on the enemy, but the fire anomaly is still at the very beginning of it building up. In that case, it might be more effective and quicker for you to swap into Burnice, especially if you perform a parry, to then use the double flamethrower to quickly build up the fire anomaly and trigger disorder. Because in case you weren't aware, the timing between when you trigger the first anomaly effect and the second will actually affect the disorder damage. So if you take a lot of time to build up that second anomaly effect, the damage output is going to be much lower. But I'll explain that in more detail in a moment. Now, the final way in which you can increase the anomaly buildup of the double flamethrower is after you perform a chain attack and end with Burnice, you can then follow up with your EX special attack to go into the double flamethrower, and the anomaly buildup will now be 145%, meaning that not only do you guarantee a fire anomaly effect, but you are already almost halfway building into the next one, so that when you swap to your other DPS character, you will be able to build up the second fire anomaly effect as you are building up assault with Jane Doe, for example, so that whenever you trigger disorder, you are effectively already halfway to building your second disorder. So to neatly wrap up this segment of the video in a concise manner for you to take this information into account, on screen you can see the different ways in which you are able to increase the anomaly buildup with Burnice. And this is something that I constantly see people not taking into account, as I even saw streamers not doing the heavy attack into the double flamethrower and never really ending the chain attack with Burnice, which leads to a lot of wasted potential. I think it's just that a lot of players have gotten used to ending their chain attacks with their main DPS characters, and now that we have a character that can perform very well on field but also off field, it's a different variable that people might not expect. aspects. And another point regarding wasted potential with Burnice, I think it's safe to say that a lot of people are sleeping on Burnice's ultimate. Now, credit where credit is due, I think everybody appreciates the beautiful animations on Burnice's ultimate. But this ultimate is actually way better than you might think, because not only does this ultimate deal a lot of damage and also build a lot of fire anomaly, but whenever you perform it, you can actually swap into a different character as if you were performing a quick assist, and that will not only extend the duration of Burnice's ultimate, but will naturally allow you to use your second DPS character to deal additional damage and build up the second disorder to deal even more damage. And so unless you have a very hyper invested Jane Doe, for example, that has Mindscape 4 in her W engine, then I think that for 99% of scenarios it's going to be more beneficial for you to use your ultimate with Burnice rather than using it with Jane Doe or any other second DPS. Just make sure that you put Burnice before the second anomaly character so that you can swap into them with the quick assist from the ultimate. Now, a small optimization that I see a lot of people also missing out on that might perhaps be a misconception is that I don't think many players are spending enough time on field with Burnice. That is to say that while yes, Burnice is a character that is extremely effective as an off-field character, she's also quite powerful as an on-field character, as she's able to build up the fire anomaly very quickly, and even while performing the double flamethrower, she is pretty much uninterruptible and gains damage resistance. So if you ever find yourself being full on energy on Burnice, you should definitely swap into her just to deal a lot of damage, build up the fire anomaly, and also refill your nitro fuel. So yeah, don't just use Burnice to simply apply the scorched effect on enemies and never to return to her ever again. So do try to spend a bit more time with her on field. Now that being said, I've also seen some people claim that Burnice is an on-field main DPS, much like other characters like Jane Doe or Ellen Jo, where they're trying to pair up Burnice with a support and a stun character, but I think that if you use Burnice this way, you're going to find yourself missing out on a lot of damage. And given that Burnice's entire kit revolves around applying and triggering anomaly effects, pairing her with other anomaly focused characters will enable much more powerful synergies and increase the overall team damage output. So do consider characters who can apply different types of anomalies to maximize the disorder effects, even though there are other characters like Nekomata or Caesar, for example, that despite not being anomaly characters can still apply anomaly effects fairly quickly. And naturally, if you're using Burnice as an on-field DPS character, you're not really going to be taking advantage of her additional ability, the Fire Kindling, which requires you to trigger the Afterburn effect, and doing so will increase the anomaly buildup rate of the Afterburn. So it is very much focused on having a different character on field. Now, another very important thing that you can easily mess up with Burnice and pretty much all the other anomaly characters is the way in which you trigger the disorder effect. As I briefly touched on previously, timing is of the essence when it comes to proccing disorder, as anomaly's disorder's damage output will decrease over time. So you do need to pay attention to the disorder buildup of the enemy to try to match the anomaly effect from the two different elements for them to trigger at nearly the same time so that the disorder damage can be as high as possible. Now, the way that it works is going to be different depending on the type of disorder that you activate. So if you start off the interaction by having the enemy become burned with Burnice, and only then do you trigger assault with Jane Doe after, you are going to be applying a burn disorder. However, if the order was reversed and you would be applying assault first with Jane Doe and only then apply the burn with Burnice's afterburn, then you would trigger an assault disorder. And the damage of these disorders is actually tied to the attack value of the character that initiated the disorder. So for example, if you trigger a burn disorder, there is going to be 9 procs of 450% of Burnice's attack, on top of a decaying amount of procs that is at maximum 19, although again it is going to vary between the time of application of the first anomaly effect and when you actually trigger the disorder. And on screen now you can see exactly how all of these disorder effects differ from each other, with the burn, shock and corruption disorder all of them being procs of damage over time, whereas freeze and assault are all a single instance of damage, with the initial burst of damage being 450% of the character's attack, but then you get an additional motion value percentage that can only go up to 67.5%, and the longer it takes you for you to trigger it, the lower damage you're going to get from it. And because the damage of these disorder effects are tied to the character's attack, not only do you ideally want to match these, but you also want to initiate the application with the character with the highest attack. So you should check whether or not you have the highest attack with Burnice or Jane Doe or any other anomaly character, so that if you're trying to optimize, ideally you would initiate with the one with the highest attack. Now naturally, a very important optimization and aspect to making sure that Burnice deals as much damage as possible is the W engine that you choose to equip, as well as the mindscapes. So let's start start with the W engine and how worth it is it to get the signature W engine. Naturally, the Flamemaker Shaker is going to be the best option for Burnice, though you do have some close options that you might want to consider, with especially the Electro Lip Gloss, the Battle Pass W engine, being very appealing for the additional attack increase by simply triggering anomaly effects. And because you are ideally going to be playing Burnice into a disorder focused team, you're going to be constantly activating them, so you will have no trouble having this effect active. And when we take a look at the calculations here on screen, you can see that purely in terms of damage, the Flamemaker Shaker and the Electro Lip Gloss at signature 5 are actually very close, with the Fusion Compiler coming in third place at 88% effectiveness, followed by the more free-to-play options, those being the Weeping Gemini and the Rainforest Gourmet. Now, one thing that this craft does not take into account is the extra comfort that you get from having her signature W engine, as it provides additional energy regen for Burnice while she is off field, which means that Burnice is not going to run into the scenario where she doesn't have enough energy to use her EX special to build up her meter, although truth be told, that by itself is not that big of a deal. And so rather than considering going for the Flamemaker Shaker, you might want to go for her first Mindscape, as not only does it increase the heat limit from 100 to 140, but you also start combat with that additional heat, meaning that you're never really going to run out of it, and the damage multiplier of the Afterburn effect is going to be increased by 100% of Burnice's attack, on top of the fire anomaly buildup from the after effect being increased by 25%. And once again, when we take a look at the calculations between having a Burnice with no Mindscape and a Burnice with the first Mindscape, the damage increase might not seem all that big, but again, it's all about the comfort and making sure that you're able to maintain enough uptime with Burnice at all times. So between the W engine and the first Mindscape, the Mindscape definitely wins. Now, I did actually end up going for the W engine, and that is for a very specific reason. You see, I have both Burnice and Jane Doe, and I plan on having them pretty much always on the same team because of how well they synergize. And because I don't have any of Jane Doe's Mindscapes and I don't have her W engine, and so I am using the Electro Lip Gloss, the Battle Pass W engine on Jane Doe, meaning that unless I went for Burnice's W engine, my other options would be to go for the Fusion Compiler, which I also don't have, or I would have to go for the Weeping Gemini, the Rainforest Gourmet, or the Roaring Ride, all of which are significantly weaker than the Battle Pass W engine and her signature W engine. And because Burnice is going to be a character that can fit into a ton of teams, especially as we get more anomaly characters in the future, I do believe that I'm going to get good usage out of this Flamemaker Shaker, especially because this W engine isn't necessarily tied to a specific element. If we ever end up getting another off-field anomaly character, they are likely going to be able to make good use out of Burnice's W engine. So there is some good long-term viability by going for her W engine. And of course, if I'm lucky on a couple of pulls here and there, I might still be able to get Burnice's Mindscape. Now, another very important factor when it comes to Burnice's damage output is of course her teammates. Naturally, the anomaly on-field characters are going to be the #1 recommendation, so Jane Doe, Piper, and Grace. And that leaves us with a third slot left to fill, in which ideally you would have a character that is going to increase the damage output of Burnice's off-field damage, while also increasing the on-field damage of your second anomaly character. And so we are left with only 3 real options: Caesar, Seth, and Lucy. Caesar because of her amazing shield that not only makes your characters uninterruptible, but also allows them to deal more damage to enemies. Seth because he allows other characters to build up anomaly quicker. And lastly, Lucy with her team-wide attack buff, as well as her little piggies that can also increase the day's buildup on the enemies. And when deciding the optimal support between these 3 characters, I am very confident in saying that Lucy is by far the best out of all 3 of them, especially if you have multiple Mindscapes of her, because the problem with Caesar and also Seth as well is that their buff only applies to a single character. Now technically you can apply Seth's shield to both Burnice as well as the second anomaly character, but you will need to swap into Seth and perform his entire combo to then apply the shield to both characters in 2 different scenarios, and that would lead to a big DPS loss because of his uptime. And Caesar's buff, despite how powerful it actually is, only applies to the character that is currently on field. And so Lucy being a character that you can simply use the EX special attack once, forget about it, and that is going to be active for both Burnice and the second anomaly character, means that despite her attack increase being effectively lower than the damage increase that you get from having Caesar on the team, because Lucy's buff applies to both characters, it's actually more valuable. You can still definitely have a lot of success by having Caesar on the same team as Burnice, but just keep in mind that Lucy is going to be the better option. Again, despite how simple Burnice's kit may be, there's a lot of things that people are missing out on, and so if you want to maximize your rewards in the shield defense, for example, these are all important things that you should take into account. And my next video is going going to be precisely talking about Yanagi and more anomaly characters in the future, so if you want to know more about them, subscribe to the channel. I hope you learned something useful, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to win the next 50/50 or I owe you a pair of shoes.